Okay, this is the June 10th, 2021 meeting of School Committee, Finance Subcommittee. And we're going to start by voting minutes. I'm going to move approval of the May 13th, 2021 minutes. Can I get a second? Thank you, David. Susan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And then we'll go to gifts and grants. I don't see Donna here, but Susan or David, do you have any questions on those? No? Okay, so I'm going to move favorable action on those two. Susan? Oh, I need a second. Actually, can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Susan. And how do you vote, Susan?
Yes.
And David?
Yes.
Okay, great. So next item up is the FY21 budget update, including the reserve fund transfer. And there is not a lot of updates to share there. We're still waiting to go to select board. And the date for that was going to be next week and now maybe won't be next week. And we're still figuring that out. It may be the 22nd or the 29th, but that's something that's in process as we schedule that. And beyond that, there doesn't appear to be much of an update on whether or not the overall deficit has shifted. It appears that there hasn't been any big shifts that we have. As everyone knows, Mary Ellen is out of the office this week, so we don't have an update from her. But Donna earlier said that there was not any large update that she knew of. FY22 budget update.
Mariah, can I just ask something quickly?
Yeah.
So we had a reserve fund transfer at the beginning of the calendar year for testing, and we are not going to spend all of that, which is great. At the same time, we know that there may be needs this coming fall. So I think it would be helpful as we close out this budget year to figure out how that works. Because my guess is that there may well be, Melissa would be great, because there may well be testing needs this fall. And so panel 4 in particular was asking, like, do we have to go through that whole process again because it's a new fiscal year or what? So let me just put that out there. If we have an answer now, great. Otherwise,
do you know, or does one of you know how much is left in the current request? Just how much? It was 600.
It's right? More than half. No, it was. We had 300,000. The town had 200,000 for the site, for the town site. Of our 300,000, we've used less than half because of a variety of things. Number one, just enormously careful and prudent management, but also when the DESE program came online, we sort of flipped over to them pretty quickly. So there's more than half left. And people also recognize that we may have needs in the fall. So that's the background from Melissa.
Right. So in terms of the reserve fund money, that's fiscal 21 money. So that can't get carried over into the fall. But, a testing program in the fall likely would be eligible for American Rescue Plan funding because that is specifically related to COVID. So that seems like an eligible expense.
Okay, so then I think I'll just leave it in someone's hands. I'm not quite sure whose hands. Maybe Donna can just sort of sort out with you, Melissa, Trisha holds the budget. So for the last reserve fund. So I'll start an email just to close that loop for the next, 20 days. So there's no more, I don't think there's any more spending in the next 20 days.
Okay, thanks. Going on to FY22, Melissa, would you be willing to give an update on ARP as you know it?
Jim and Mary Ellen, and I forwarded it to you, Mariah. Mel just sent out a quick note. There's still information kind of flowing in. So Treasury released an FAQ a couple of days ago. We're in the process of analyzing that in relation to kind of the overall guidance. We are looking at creating reporting structures using OpenGov. I had a meeting today with the comptroller's office to talk about, the structure of reporting that we would need. So we're kind of all in the same boat. I've talked to my other peer communities. No one has really started spending yet. I think we're still just trying to digest the guidance and understand what the rules are. As an example, the revenue replacement category is the broadest. And there's still a lot of confusion about, especially in particular Massachusetts, the Treasury says just all general revenue. And, well, all right, so that includes property taxes, but what about debt exclusions? That's making your revenue numbers go up. But that's almost doing, we won't be able to claim that we've lost revenue because the debt exclusion makes it look like it's higher than it really is. So we've asked for a clarification on that question. That's just an example of some of the things we still need to sort out. Once we have a better understanding, then we'll be talking about, the process, and we're engaging with OpenGov as well. They're building a module specifically to help us manage the requests. And so that work will be starting, I think, next week. So.
Thanks. Any questions?
Well, there are
Oh.
also new people on this call that I don't know. I'm Melissa Goff. I'm the Deputy Town Administrator. So.
Thank you, Melissa. Any questions from the subcommittee or other school committee members about ARP? Helen, do you have a question?
No, but I was going to suggest maybe people introduce themselves to Melissa so she knows who people are.
Sure.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi,
Helen, why don't you start?
We know each other.
Okay, very good. Jeff, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jeff Ziplow. I'm with a firm called Clifton Larson Allen CLA, and I'm here to discuss the report that we put together on the financial analysis base that I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit.
Yep. And then Melissa, Jim, Matt, Michelle, right?
I don't
No?
think I know
Okay.
Michelle.
Michelle, go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, Melissa. Michelle McGlone. I'm the fairly new director of Brookline Adult and Community Education. So it's a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And then David, Jennifer. Do you know Sasha?
I do not.
Okay. Sasha, go ahead.
Hi, Melissa. I'm Sasha Palmer. I'm the Director of Food Services.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
And I think we've got everyone, right?
I think so.
Yes.
Now I
Okay.
will ask a question if I can.
Yeah, go for it.
So Melissa was talking about the big pot of money, the 34 million or so that I think we're going to get. What about the monies that are directed to the schools?
That's next on our agenda.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's a good transition. So ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 are the next item on the agenda. Donna's not here, so I guess I'll give the update that I know of, and Jim, stop me or Melissa if I'm going off, which is ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 both have the mandate of a portion allocated to learning recovery, and it's 20%, I believe. And a new aspect that is in ESSER 3 that is not in ESSER 2 is the requirement to consult multiple stakeholder constituencies in advance of spending the money. And that includes, it's a significant list of, I would say, 15 to 20 different groups. And so we have already allocated our ESSER 3 money into the budget, and we did perform multiple public hearings on the budget. With that said, we probably want to, or we certainly want to have a specific ESSER 3 stakeholder process outlined. And this is brand new information as of within the past week or so. So we haven't gotten into all the details on that yet, but we will need to look at that. And that's in advance of use. So that needs to be before the start of the year, because if we continue to use those funds to do our operating budget for FY22, which is our current plan, and without having ARP funds swapped in to replace ESSER 3. Susan, you look pensive. I would love to know what you're thinking. Or are you frozen? Oh, you're back.
Definitely not frozen.
Susan, did you hear that?
I didn't hear a thing.
Okay. Did you hear anything that I said about ESER 3?
That we wanted to start over talking to stakeholders. That's about all I got.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, so the end of that is basically, any thoughts on that for you and David as we develop this process?
So I think there's pieces of what it's eligible for. I think there's some informational and knowledge pieces of just what the possible categories are. I think there's some pieces around criteria. So what are the kinds of things that we would want to be putting in there? It might be nice to have, because it strikes me that we might be either having open-ended conversations about just wish lists, which has some value, not budgeting value, but has some value to just kind of know what we're looking for. But then there's also things that are much more specific around, particular trade-offs. So I can imagine both open-ended conversations and then more targeted conversations. But I think we also, so I can imagine going a variety of directions.
Yeah, and just to respond to that, David, before you speak up, just the other thing to make clear to people too is, open-ended conversations are great, but right now that money is actually balancing our budget. And so a wish that is granted off of a wish list may mean something in the current budget ceases to exist. So making sure that the community is aware of that as well. Go ahead, David.
I was basically going to say something similar to what you just added, that if we're going to be looking at a wish list, it's important to understand what it is that might replace and look at the opportunity costs of pursuing some of these ideas. We can't look at them in a vacuum.
Yes, agreed. So Jim, do you want to mention anything about ESER 2, ESER 3 beyond what we've discussed so far?
No, I really don't. I would only be repeating, but I will just say that the budget that has been put together really does meet the needs of the district, and we rely on these funds to do it. So as David and others have said, if they have to be diverted elsewhere, then something else has to come out of the budget. So pretty high stakes.
It is, and yet we also need to make sure we're compliant with the mandate that was just divulged about stakeholder consultation. So some time sensitive stuff that's going to have to be sorted out soon. Hi, Suzanne. So is there anything else anyone wants to talk about on ESER 2 or ESER 3 before we go ahead to Sasha's presentation on food services? Okay, Sasha, you have the floor. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, guys. Can I share my screen?
Sure.
Yeah, you should be able to, hopefully. And just to preface a little bit, so Sasha is coming today to give a little bit of a general food services update, but also specifically because this is finance subcommittee within the context of the revolving fund and sort of the budget going both for the current year and for FY22.
All right, thank you so much. Well, I'm going to start with FY21. It's been a crazy year. I've never experienced a year like this. I mean, I'm sure that most people are feeling the same way. But for us in food service, we have been working throughout the pandemic. We've not stopped. We've been doing our best to offer kids a meal, breakfast, lunch, and sometimes more throughout the pandemic. It was made possible, and I have to keep saying this, that it was made possible through the extended waiver, which is now extended through June of 2022. So come next school year and throughout the summer, we will continue to have this free meals to all kids and teens 18 and under. and 21 and under if you're in a special education program. So we started out with a somewhat slow start in September, where we had participation not as good in school due to the fact that most students were not in school during those months. We saw a lot or a higher number of participation at the remote sites. We were offering meals to families. They could come at between 5 and 6, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, to pick up meals for students who were learning, doing some kind of alternate learning, whether they were coming in through the different cohorts part-time or learning from home remotely throughout the 5 days of the week. We also offered a Saturday and Sunday, which is our weekend meal. And we saw quite a lot of families participating in that. We still continue. We have a few weeks left, and I will say, we still ask that parents continue to participate in the program. So we had a number of glitches going on with our software, and I call it glitch because there was never a software like this available. And when we saw and thought about what was the serving methods that we'll have in school, we thought that it would be a good way to build a software that would help us to have both families, teachers, and food service staff have access to either placing orders, receiving those orders, and be able to distribute it to the schools. We have steadily, as time goes by, seen some decrease in the number of complaints that we've been getting. There may be technical issues. Sometimes the software may go down, but we've always found a way to try and get meals into kids' hands or find a way to get the word out to parents of how they can access these meals if or when the software goes down. We still continued, and we will continue until the end of June, the remote pickups at the remote sites at the BHA properties, the Baker School, and Brookline High School. We want to continue. We spoke to a lot of parents, and they thought that the 5 to 6 p.m. pickup was easier than to have students taking bags or big bags home in what we had previously called the take-home meal. So that will continue until the end of June. The last delivery will be on the 25th of June, and then we'll transition into the summer program. So one of the most important and the best part of this year was that we saw a steady increase in participation. We had families coming out, participating. When students are in school, we saw high participation rates in school. We actually, for the first year, saw reasonable participation in breakfast, and breakfast participation has been something that is on our to-do list to encourage more families to participate and in the breakfast program and not just the lunch. So we're happy to see that there was a steady increase in breakfast participation as well as the lunch participation. And it's very important to note that most of our funding relies heavily on participating in the program. The higher number of students that participated, the greater our revenue was, because we were mostly dependent on the reimbursement from the USDA. There were very little to no sales to students or adults because of the situation and the ever-changing conditions that we had in the school. So we relied heavily on families participating in either the breakfast or the lunch programs. We started out offering centralized kitchens. And what that did was we had a limited staff. We had a number of our staff retiring at the end of the school year or towards the beginning of the school year. And we didn't right away went ahead and fill those positions because we were operating a centralized kitchen. what that allowed is for us to prepare meals, to condense the staffing and have or concentrate them in 1 or 2 schools and then distribute meals to others. But as the students started coming back on campus full-time, we had to start opening up more kitchens and sort of decentralize those where meals were prepared. That left us with a gap in, at the same time students were coming back, we were understaffed, we were looking to hire, we posted the positions and we were in the process of hiring. So at one point we literally had to reduce our menu because we just didn't have the capacity to produce the menu that we would traditionally produce because of our staffing. As of today, we have hired all kitchen managers. We have several new kitchen managers that started in April, and it was very important to hire for those positions in April because by the time we want to be ahead of the game for next year. And posting it now was, even as tricky as it is, we ended up getting some great candidates. And I'm excited for the potential of those candidates that we have currently. We hired approximately, I think we hired 4, one just started a month ago or 2 weeks ago, sorry. So all current manager positions are filled. So when we at the beginning of the year, we had projected that there would be little to no sales revenue. So far, we've generated quite a bit of revenue from caterings, from vending machines, from a number of other related activities that we've been doing in school. Most of our revenue, however, still comes in from the federal reimbursement, federal and state reimbursement, which is a bit higher in actual revenue than I had projected. And that is, again, as a result of the higher participation rate that we have seen in most of the months, but especially since students are back on site. We also received up to almost $250,000 in grants money that was used to purchase food or to COVID-related grants from the state. Our expenses were, and it's a little bit tricky. Most of we were very short for a number of months, and we operated not at full capacity with our personnel. We lost our admin, our food service head clerk, but we also gained a half-time worker through that we shared with another department. So that was very helpful to us, even though we lost that position. Our food costs went up quite a bit as expected because we were mostly relying on a prepackaged meal, which is a little bit more costly than us making the food inside ourselves. We also continued to do quite a bit of cooking from scratch and started also purchase foods locally, which was a little bit more expensive, but it was necessary to maintain that quality of food and to offer kids healthy organic vegetables as much as we could. It is not, so far we have seen, and it's credit to the parents in Brookline. It's credit to the help that we get, the volunteer help that we get from the community. We've had service in Christmas, all the holidays. We've been out there preparing meals for families to last them through the holiday, and we've had such great response from volunteers coming in to assist in times when we really needed all hands on deck. So it's all credit to them that we were able to have a number of families participate and increase our revenue. The participation rate over those months were very helpful in generating those additional federal reimbursements. As I said earlier, the reduction in staff due to centralization was also a factor in our expense being less than anticipated. We also saw a significant increase in overtime because we were working with not full capacity, or we were trying to hire for open positions. I have to say thanks to the community again. I was never expecting, and I shouldn't say I wasn't expecting, but it was overwhelming to see the support that families gave when we had difficulties, when it was snowing, when we called people the day before and asked for volunteers. The community showed up to help us, and we would just want to say thank you for that, because we really appreciate it, and we could not have done it without the help of the community. So for FY22, and all these numbers are based on our projections or actual numbers that we're seeing now when all students are back in school, back on site. And hopefully, as more people learn about the program, as we continue to market it and things are go back to normal, then more families will participate in the program, which would happily generate more revenue for us. So we continue to offer all meals free during next year, and we'll start with the summer program. And the summer program will still serve kids both in kids who are current or who will be attending scheduled programs like the EYS or the Universal Summer Program. We call those the closed sites. So any program that is in school, we will also continue to provide meals for those students. But additionally, we have the opportunity to open what is called open sites, like we did throughout the summer. Open it to everybody in the district. Kids 18 and under can go to any one of these parks and receive a free meal. We'll have meal service at the Pierce Park, the Pierce School Ground, as well as the Baker Park. We'll open up those parks to the public, where we will provide meals to families who are not registered in a program, or even when these programs end, we'll continue to offer meals to kids and teens. We've partnered with a number of community partners to help us throughout the summer, because we know that we also have the closed site, which is a number of summer programs across the district. But we also anticipate that the support that we got from our remote meal service will continue, and we hope to make those meals still available to families who were accessing meals remotely. So we've partnered with the Brookline Food Pantry, we're partnering with Brookline Thrives, we're partnering with the Brookline Housing Authority. We're currently speaking to the Rotary Club for assistance to partner with us to operate the summer program and celebrate it. We actually have what is called it's a promotional event that we're hoping to have. We're hoping to get families to understand and find out where these meal locations are, as well as to understand what is it we're offering and the benefits of participating in the program. So we're actually looking to have this event on the 7th of July, a day after we start the program, the summer meals program at the Pierce Playground. It's an activity, it's a fun activity for kids and families to come out, meet all of us, and learn about food services, learn about the summer program, learn about what those revenues that we get from the summer program, how it will impact the program moving into next school year. And those are our potential partners: the Brookline Thrive Housing Authority, Parent Child Plus, Women Thriving, and we just spoke to the Brookline Rotary Club, who is a potential partner, as well as the Teen Center. future initiatives before I get into the budget is we are looking to, one of the things that we have been trying to do with food service is to ensure that we're offering families the healthiest, most natural and organic foods that we can. And one of my passion is sourcing local food. So we have, along with other partners in the district from the curriculum side, the community side, and food service sides, we're partnering to apply to the Massachusetts Farm to School Institute. And it's an institute, it's a 2-day program that will allow us to center and to bring all those programs together that will make up what is called Farm to School. Farm to School is doing all of those things, sourcing locally, collaborating with the community, and bringing the school, bringing the curriculum, bringing the cafeteria and the community together to source local food, teach kids where those foods come from. Every kid should know where the food that they're eating on their plate is coming from, and emphasize the garden learning programs. We have a number of green initiatives that we're hoping that with increased funding, increased participation from families and students and everybody, we can one day be able to achieve some of these initiatives. We're looking to grow our own. We're looking to also switch from reusable materials and go back to switch from single-use materials to reusable material, reusable dishes, plates, serving utensils, and so on. So we are looking to fund dishwashers for all our kitchens. Into the projected budget, we are looking to at least increase some of the sales that we have been doing. We're trying to introduce, or we're looking to introduce a la carte items back into the school, especially the high school, as a way to entice kids to participate. Sometimes they want menu items that are not a part of the reimbursable meal. We're looking to have more a la carte items, which we did not do much of this year because of the many restrictions and the many changes and the shortness, the fact that we were short-staffed. We're also looking, because all meals will be reimbursed free for next year, we're also looking at to increase the number of federal dollars that we bring into food services. So we continue to ask people to, or families, to participate in the program, because that is the easiest way to increase our federal reimbursement. We are, however, looking at staffing all the kitchens, opening all the kitchens, and because of the added, one of the things that we didn't consider last year was what it means to add to the labor, what it's going to mean to the labor. We had to be packaging everything from food, we had to be packaging every single item individually, which was very labor intensive for our staff. So we're looking to add all the kitchens to be working at full capacity staff. And that's why personnel has increased, or will increase over 2022. Food costs continues to rise. It didn't, one of the thing that is helping or will help us this year to keep our food costs at a reasonable rate is the fact that we are in a collaborative with a number of other school districts around the mass buying group. And what that allows us is to be able to purchase meals in bulk at a reduced cost. And we just put out an RFP, and most of the items came at a cheaper cost than we were currently paying, paying last year, or we are currently paying. So that is a good thing. That is, it's a little bit more work to transition from vendor to vendor, but in the end, it is well worth it. We're not looking, and I'm as with 2021, and I didn't mention that I'm not looking for a deficit. I don't think there will be a deficit. We are on track to have actually profit at the end of the year. And the same thing goes for 2022. I will stop because I know I've been talking long. I have to, however, say thank you to the hardworking food service workers that have been working. They have not, I see them every day and I wonder, I don't know how they come in every single day. They have been doing that forever. And I want to say thank you. We really appreciate the fact that they have been there and they have been working very hard to get meals out. There would be no, I've never worked with a more resilient group of staff, and I'm happy to have them. And also I have to mention, because I keep coming on and not mentioning the fact that we do have what is called a food service volunteer group, and they are, sometimes when I'm drained and tired, they're the ones who are still working, and they do it with care and love and love for what they do. So I want to say thank you to all those food service volunteers who have been working since before COVID to help get us through this trying time. I think that's all for today.
Thank you, Sasha. That was great.
Thank you.
Subcommittee members, do you have questions, comments? Or other members of school committee? I have some. Oh, why don't we go ahead, Helen, and then Jen, and then Suzanne.
I decided to use my raise hand thing instead of raising my hand. Thank you, Sasha, for this report. And, you know, it's music to my ears that we are finally in positive territory with food services. I think in my 30 years on the school committee, I actually don't remember many times, if any, that we had a surplus as opposed to a deficit. But I have a couple of questions. One simple one. The July 7th thing at Pierce Playground, what time is that at?
Starts at 4 p.m. It's a 2-hour, 4 to 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you. So that we can make sure that we announce that at school committee too. You had listed non-food expenses, and it was like 700,000. I'm just curious, what are some of the bigger items in that?
I think most of that is supplies, and that includes paper. One of the things that I didn't realize cost a lot was labels. It was a ton to label each because what we do is label each individual bags for students. We do that, and it was necessary because students with allergies, we need to be able to differentiate, but most of that expense was from supplies.
I see. Okay. And one other question. So before COVID, was our budget, when you, I guess we're talking FY20, where did we end up there? Were we in the positive in FY20, or had there been and you may not have that information right at your fingertips, so.
Maybe Matt, I came in FY, I don't even remember, it feels like years.
It does, I remember you coming.
I think you started in fall 2019, didn't you?
In fall 2019,
Yeah.
and then my first year ended with COVID.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I think we were, if I can remember, we were on track to be at least reasonable, but then we were paying staff, we weren't getting in any revenue. So that kind of, and Matt can expand on that if that's what.
We lost money for FY20. I don't remember how much, but it was part of the transfer at the end of the year to cover costs, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, all right, great. That was what I was curious if where we had landed. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call on Jennifer and Suzanne, and then I want to see if we can wrap up in 5 or 10 minutes, just so we can make sure we leave plenty of time for the base update. Go ahead, Jen.
I'm going to be really quick. I want to really say thank you to Sasha and the whole team. This is of all the very many food service conversations we've had in the last 3 years. This has been my favorite one. I'm really excited about the summer meal kickoff. I think that getting the reimbursements and the program through the government has been amazing and life-changing for a lot of families. So I'm really excited about, promoting summer meals. I'm excited at the potential about thinking about breakfast promotion next year. I also want to really thank the staff that are out there. We're an RLA family. We pick up every Friday and the staff are out there in the rain, in the cold, in the snow. They've been there. It's been an amazing program. So I really want to just say thank you, because there's a lot of RLA families I know that participate in that program as well. And so, I think that people have been really thoughtful about that. And I just wanted to say thank you, but also to be excited and let you know I was excited about the idea about sourcing healthy food, sourcing locally. I'm really interested in reducing food waste, also in increasing our reusables, and really excited about the idea of bringing back actual silverware and things that can be washed, and the increase in our gardening program. So I love what's on your radar. I'm really excited, and I'm really glad to see the program where it's at right now. So I hope we can use this and roll it in to future years and build on it. So thank you, Sasha. This is great.
Thank you.
Suzanne?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sasha. I feel like it was just yesterday we hired you, but I guess that's just not true, is it? So I just wondered if you could comment on the expanded restaurant culinary program at the high school. Will that impact you? Is that under you? I don't know how that works. What will that do for your bottom line?
So for this, maybe Matt can expand. We were planning to collaborate and to have reimbursable meals being sold through the restaurant. But I speaking with Britt, I don't know, understand. I'm not sure yet how it would work, since our program is all free and they need to generate a revenue with their meal. So that's something that we're still looking to work on. I don't know if it will be this year or next year.
Okay, so I guess that's something we should probably keep on our radar, because I don't want one program to undermine the other. And so somehow they need to work together, I think. And my other quick question is, does your budget include composting? I know the mothers out front have worked really hard about composting. Is that in the budget? Are we still fighting that? Matt knows about the fights we've had about that, but
Well, everybody's happy.
everybody's happy. I love that, Matt.
And the reason everybody's happy or going to be is because DPW is going to pick up the costs for the composting. It'll turn out the same way that trash and recycling does. It's our responsibility to sort it and get it out to the curb for DPW to pick it up. So we have worked that out.
Thank you for making that happen.
It'll be starting next year. Well, I'd like to thank Eddie Gilbert with DPW and the folks on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee that helped bring that evolution to where we always thought it needed to be.
Yeah.
And Sasha and Tess have worked really hard on the program this year with a lot of different changes. It's been a very long year. But one thing that wasn't as easy as it sounds is setting up the pickups with the Brookline Housing Authority and starting habits to try to get people to participate when they never had that before. So that was not nearly as easy as it sounds, and it made a big difference. And it was probably the difference in the program turning a profit this year or not. So thank you, Sasha.
Yeah. Thank you for the composting. I do appreciate it.
Yeah.
The plan.
Mothers Out Front will be at the kickoff event promoting composting. So that's great.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Helen,
Just-
one last question, then I want to make 2 quick things and then we'll turn over to base.
It's not a question. You may have seen me laughing, Sasha, when you were talking about the dishwashers. I was only laughing because I remember when we started out, every school had a dishwasher. Every school had trays, reusable trays that we washed, and it worked, and then we became modern, supposedly. And now we're going back, which I think is the best way.
I just wanted to, so my comment, one of my comments was, Helen, if, I don't know, or Matt, like in terms of the CIP and what it takes to put the dishwashers back into the school, and is this on the CIP sort of checklist for the upcoming, how do we
We,
operationalize getting that in the process if you
Some
haven't already?
schools have them, no,
The-
Matt?
not to the level for dishes. We have things for pots and pans, they're much smaller, so we need bigger units if we were gonna be washing lots of plates or trays and silverware.
Can we put it
Bakery
on the
doesn't have it?
capital? Can we put it on
We-
the capital agenda?
We can.
Okay.
The capital will sort of be, is in the process of being reborn. I won't tie up this meeting with that, but, you know, capital went a little thin this past year with COVID because our attentions were focused elsewhere. And with high school coming online and Driscoll starting construction and Pierce potentially having a project, like capital projects, and sometimes shifts like this in food service sort of reset our priorities. So stay tuned. You know, this August, there should be a pretty new looking list of requests.
Okay. And then my only other question, Sasha, was you mentioned that July 7th, I think, or July 6th is when the summer program starts. And I wanted to just ask about the gap, if there's going to be any gap in service between the end of the school year and the official start of the summer program, and what, if anything, school committee needs to do to close that gap.
So we don't anticipate there's a gap. We usually pick up on a Friday and families would pick up 7 days worth of meal. When we do have a longer holiday, we do offer them the number of days at one pickup. And we do it in a way that we understand that families may not have storage, so we offer meals that can easily be stored. So our last day for pickup would be on Friday, the 25th, and that pickup would be a 10-day pickup. Or I think we will have enough meals to last through July 6th when our first meal starts. We've done this for most of our holidays, so we will, there won't be a gap. We will have staff coming in, staff and working on the 22nd, but we are looking to have a few staff come in to make those meals and distribute on those days.
So it's like just basically like a vacation.
Like a vacation.
Okay, that's great. Okay, I think we're gonna say thank you, Sasha, so much to you, and
Thank you.
endorse completely all the thank yous that you said to all the staff and the amazing stuff that's happened this year in terms of keeping kids fed and families fed. So thank you.
Mhm.
And I think we'll see you again next week at school committee anyway.
Yes.
And so we can say thank you again next week. But thank you
so
for the
much.
financial update too, which is great. And now we'll go turn it over to Michelle for base. So thank you. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, how's everybody this evening? We have a guest with us today, Jeff Ziplo of CLA Associates, and
Oh,
Jeff
I'm going to
is-
interrupt you really quickly, Michelle, because we also have in the attendees Arthur Conquest, Peter Meyer, and Kenny Kozel. And Robin, do you mind promoting them so that we can have them join us as well?
Okay, great. I'm glad they're here.
Yeah.
So Jeff is going to give us a quick overview of the audit that he conducted on the base revolving fund. And then after he's done with that, then I'll jump back on and talk about sort of how we got to where we are today, kind of filling in the context of some of the numbers that he's going to share, as well as talk about our music extension program. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Jeff Ziplo to the committee.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I am not going to take too much time because I think we want to give base its due in direction and certainly what the future is going to be looking like for base. But I want to say a number of months ago, we responded to an RFP based on some concerns that Michelle had as it relates to, you know, the base revolving fund, and wanted to get a bit more evaluation on the fund balance within the base operations. I believe when Michelle and I actually spoke, there was a thought that is a bit old, but she thought that there was about $1.3 million in fund balance available to base. So one of the things we did is we came in, there was a report that was produced by Heller and Heller Consulting back in 2018, 2019. It was an operational review of base. We did review that. We also received a number of financial statements, trial balances actually, for fiscal year 18, 19, 20, and 21. And we did a number of analyses on the financial information. There was a concern that there was monies that were borrowed or loaned to the school district in the amount of roughly $475,000 that was borrowed, and the question was it ever replaced? And so what I just wanted to report very quickly on is the following. The Heller and Heller report, actually part of that operational review, it provided some financial information. The bad news about that is there was, I guess the best way to describe it, there was a mistake made, and they were showing surplus amounts for a number of fiscal years when in fact they were deficits. And so that may have started or brought to light, oh, everything's good in base. But the reality is, and when we were looking at the fund balance situation in base, in fiscal year 17, there was a fund balance of almost $1.3 million. In fiscal year 18, there was a loss of about $169,000. Fiscal year 19, there was another loss of $223,000. Fiscal year 20 was when COVID hit, and there was a loss of $692,000. So I guess what I'm trying to portray is we did have a fairly substantial fund balance back in 17, but over the course of the past several years, we have been running a deficit, and the year of COVID, it was a fairly substantial deficit balance. We have confirmed that the monies that were loaned to the school were actually repaid back. We did validate that through journal entries and have confirmed that. So the monies went out, but they were put back in within a relatively short period of time, and certainly within the same fiscal year. So there were no issues there. So I guess, a couple things. One of the things that we certainly would like this group and certainly base to consider is they really need to be viewed as a small business, and as a result, they really do need to consider hiring a part-time bookkeeper to help really monitor and monitor their financial position, monitor expenses, monitor the revenues coming in, so that they can provide that information to the base committee on a monthly basis and can adjust their operations accordingly. There's some other things, and I won't get into all the details, but documenting some of the policies and procedures, including, how the Brookline Public Schools is calculating rent of the facility charges, and helping to identify if base is responsible for any other expenses. And one of the things we just think is very important is that this information is documented, it's agreed upon, and everyone understands what the rules are for the base operations. Right now, to be quite frank, it's not documented, and there's certainly a number of discussions that have taken place during the project to say, well, should we really be paying this? Should we really be paying for these other charges? And I think it just needs to be formalized. And In addition to, we also need to make sure that meeting minutes are being taken, reviewed and approved on a regular basis and that they're available for consumption. We attempted to obtain the meeting minutes for the past several years and the months within those respective years, and we were able to find less than a handful of meeting minutes. And then lastly, we were also recommending that BASE develop a financial operations and policy and procedure manual so that there's a very delineated document that provides guidance as to what accounts to expense to and how revenues are going to be identified. So I'm going to stop there. And I don't know, Michelle, if you had any additional comments. I'm sure you do. So go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to go ahead if it's all right and share my screen. Am I able to do that right now, Robin?
Can I
Yes,
ask a
you should be able to do
question
that.
in the meantime, while you're doing that?
Go ahead,
Rob-
Helen.
Will we get a copy of the audit?
You received it today.
We did.
It was sent to you by Robin earlier today.
Okay, apologize. Thank you.
Not a
Yeah,
problem.
so the audit obviously revealed a lot of good information and concerning information, especially given the fact that, you know, I think a lot of people assumed that BASE had, you know, a pretty hefty surplus when in fact, during that time period of the past, you know, 4 or 5 years, the opposite in fact has been true. And so, you know, I think it'd be good to just try to take a second and if I can get my slide to forward here. I'm not sure what's going on. To just go through some of the reasons, you know, for it. So I started off with our revenues. Now, this is as of June 7th. We are still taking in revenues for our summer program. And you can see that, you know, we've, as of June 7th, brought in a little over $400,000 in revenues. Some of that includes some donation funds, which has been something that's new this year, that we receive donations from members in the community and from our board to try to help us, especially in providing some financial aid to families that might need it in order to access some of our courses. And on the expenses side of things, we really are running a bare bones budget. There is no meat really there. Our largest expenses are in the personnel. So not only like the base staff, but also the hundreds of teachers in the community that we hire to teach some of our classes. You can see that our revenues have been declining. So I think I call it the perfect storm, everything that has happened. So going back to 2019, which is kind of this yellowish light orange bar, we had the impact on the construction at the high school impacted us. We weren't able to offer some of our most popular classes like the cooking or the pottery or the wood shop, things that specialty classrooms are located there. And then you see in the dark blue in 2020, the pandemic began in March. So we had three decent months of good revenues, and then the pandemic happened, and then it's just been a steady decline. And if, you know, everybody could think about, you know, when you're watching the news, you see, you know, 1 minute it seems like, oh, you know, things are getting better and the virus infection rates and death rates are declining in the warmer months, and then the cold months appear, and then there was huge spikes again. So it's really difficult for us to make some good predictions on what our class, you know, enrollment and revenue would be. We did shift very quickly from in-person to online, and I appreciate all the people in the district that helped make that happen, to provide us with Zoom accounts for all of our instructors and getting them up and running and training. So we had some of the same issues that the school district had, you know, in implementing in that. But here's a chart you can really get a good idea. What's in bold are the numbers of revenues that came in for each month. And even just comparing, so for example, if you look at period 8, which is February, so in fiscal year 20, we brought in $112,000 as compared to February this year, we only brought in close to $3,000. It's very erratic. And this, I think, demonstrates it even better. This chart just shows, you know, from one month to the next. Some months we had, you know, really great revenues, and the next months we didn't. We had a spike in revenues in September, and again in March, because the staff rallied to try to raise money. So they created 2 additional programs that were meant to be fundraisers, where I believe we raised close to $20,000 between the 2 of them, which were really great. We had Governor Dukakis appear, we had an astronaut appear, business leaders, medical leaders, you name it. I hope some of you got the chance to see it. The spike that you see in the last bar here is because we are taking in revenues now for our summer children's program and our adult ed program. So it's actually a little misleading, because some of those revenues will be transferred over into fiscal year 22. All right, so staffing mitigation. When I first started and, you know, was told I had, you know, over $1.2 million to work with, our staff, we had, I want to say there was 8 or 9 of us at that point, and it has just been reduced as we've gone through. In hindsight, you know, perhaps we should have made those cuts a little bit sooner, but that being what it is, we went from 4 program coordinators, which is these first bars here, down to 1 full-time and 2 part-time. And then we had 4 BISA secretaries that had different functions. Our program runs in the evening and the weekends during the day. So we had a daytime secretary, an evening and weekend secretary, and then another member on the staff who took on different responsibilities for secretarial work. But they dropped from 4 down to 2, and now we're just down to 2 part-time salaried secretaries in the office. So we did our best to try to mitigate through staffing, because that is our largest expense in operating. We also non-renewed the lease to the Korean church, which saved us about $27,000. But that is going to hurt us going into the fall, because that's where we have run all of our ESL classes during the daytime. And it, you know, obviously with kids being in school, we can't have adults from the community also. You know, the rooms wouldn't be available, and also, you know, we like to keep a separation. So that's going to be a challenge for us in the fall that we're going to need to deal with, which brings me to catalogs. So we switched from our print catalogs. So we printed usually over 50,000 catalogs, and we'd have them distributed, and some were mailed to our database. We have over 17,000 people in our database. It got distributed around the Metro Boston area. It was a great marketing tool for us. To try to save money, we converted to a digital catalog that we emailed out instead. That has hurt us, because it is a marketing tool. When you send out a catalog through email, people look at it once and say, oh, I'll go back to it, and then they're not reminded of it. Whereas if you have a hard copy, you'll come back to it. Music extension. So I know that Kenny Colzall is with us here as well, which will be great if you all have some questions about music extension. He might be able to also answer those questions. But, you know, we brought in some significant revenues as a result. So music extension, there's an average of 300 students that we call them tiny musicians. So our tiny musicians are taking music lessons to complement what they're learning in the daytime through band and orchestra. We give out a good amount of financial aid. I'd say an average of $5,000 or $6,000 a year in financial aid to families that can't afford the lessons. And we do it based on the free and reduced lunch formulas. As you can see, some of our staff overhead, we estimate about 500 hours to really do this program right. A bulk of those hours happen in the late summer, early fall, and then the rest is just monitoring things throughout the year. The salaries for the instructors eats up a good portion of those. So kind of the awkward thing to talk about here is the room assessment. So the program would actually, music extension would run at a profit if we didn't have those room assessments. And you could see that we ran into a deficit for those programs with those room assessments. So what I want to talk about is what price we're charging for our music extension program. Currently, we compete with the Brookline Music School. Brookline Music School charges quite a bit more for their lessons. So I think we have some room where we could go up in our tuition, but we really do want to keep it affordable for the public. And the more we go up in tuition, the more we're going to need to ask for support for financial aid. The financial aid right now comes out of our revenues. So I'm going to be proposing, and you can see on the screen, increasing private lessons from $25.64 an hour up to $30 an hour, and then semi-private from $17.82 to $22.85. I apologize.
Oh,
This looks.
sorry. Those are, just to clarify, those are half-hour lessons, not hour lessons.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, for 30-minute lessons. Yes, thank you. Is that Kenny that just spoke?
That it is.
Michelle, do you mind just going back 1 second?
Yes.
Can you just confirm when the last time was that tuition, oh, I see, raised tuition by $20. So just
Yeah.
for the semi-private one, it went up?
Only,
Is that
yes,
right?
that's correct. And the reason for that is I was told that I couldn't go above the $718 amount for the 30-minute private lessons, because that was the highest cap that school committee would allow us to charge, that I would need to come back to you to get approval to increase that. And so that's one of the reasons I'm doing that, where the semi-private was less expensive. So I had some wiggle room. I had, the cap was $718. So I did increase the semi-private by $20 for the full tuition amount. So it did raise some additional money and did help us, but I really feel like we need to make some further adjustments, especially if we're going to continue with the room assessment.
Keep go. Arthur, I'm going to ask you to just hold unless it's a clarifying question. We'll keep the discussion.
Well, it is
at
a
the end.
clarifying question, but I can wait.
Okay,
can
thanks.
wait.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so this chart shows trends from 2017 up to my projections for 2022 of the number of students enrolled. And you can see I'm going to refer to the 2020-2021 column right now, where we brought in about $126,000 in tuition. We paid out $6,200 in financial aid. We paid out close to $95,000 to the instructors. So our subtotal, our profit after paying the teachers, but before the room assessment, was $25,000. This year, we're not incurring room assessments because they're online. So we're going to be, we did okay with the 25,000, and then I average about 22,500 is the cost for staffing the program for this music extension. So we came out ahead this year in fiscal year 21 with $3,000. But to show you the difference with my projection for 2022, assuming we get 281 students. So I took an average of the years prior to the pandemic and hope that we get the 281. We would bring in close to $200,000 in revenue if we get your approval to increase the tuition. We would also add a registration fee onto this program of $10 per student. I don't know if you noticed the other screen, it's $40 per family for the music school. So we could talk about that. But for financial assistance, I'm estimating about $7,000 and then about $127,000 to pay for the staff. And it really does depend on how many kids sign up for private versus semi-private. So there's a lot of wiggle room, as we don't know what that's going to look like. With I estimate 152 rooms that we would be using throughout the school year for these lessons. And I believe that we would be charged for 1 hour, even though the lessons are only a half hour long. And the music practice room, the rate for those are a little bit higher than a regular classroom. So if I'm correct, I think it's with our 70% discount, it's $10.50. So that's where I came up with the $44,688 that will probably be assessed in rooms just for these classes, which after the assessment, we're still doing okay with the increase in the tuition. But after we incorporate, our staff costs and the covering benefits for those staff, we're probably only going to end up with a profit of about $1,000. Does anybody have any questions before I go
I
forward?
think Matt has a comment.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so the discount that we were charging for the rooms was about a 70% discount.
Yes.
So if a room was, $10, we were charging you $3 an hour, not $10.50 an hour. Just so that number is going to be lower. So the music practice rooms are smaller rooms. I want to say they're priced at $7 an hour, a regular, because it's 100 square feet about. The classrooms are priced at $12.50 an hour, and then the discount is 70% off of that. So, I mean, and the way that when we went over this back when a couple of directors before you with Claudia, was that we were going to try to discount it in a way that it was sustainable, that wouldn't be a dramatic increase to user fees, so that several kids in a class, if you had enough to run a class for most programs, not music in particular, but everything else, that by adding the fee, you would only have to add the fee, increase it by $1 an hour per user, and you wouldn't have to do that every year thereafter. So that, it'd be a fraction of that it would be assessed under the other guidelines that the auditor suggested that we clarify in better written detail, and we will.
Yeah.
We'll do
Matt,
that.
can I ask a question about that? What you just said is the room use assessment that Michelle has here of the $57,443.75 for 2018, that row there, is that the full amount after the discount?
I don't know exactly where those numbers came from for 2017, 2018. How did you calculate that, Michelle? Because
Those
we
came
didn't.
from, we used School Dude, the report that Lindsay sent us out of School Dude. So that was based on the hours and the charges. And then the $10.50 rate that I used, Matt, was from a document that I thought that I was going, it had listed out all the different rooms and the different rates. And that is the discounted rate for a music practice room, at least on the chart that I saw. Those were originally $15 an hour. So with the discount, it came to $10.50. So if I'm incorrect, I need an updated list.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think Mariah knows the answer, so go ahead.
Well, I do know the answer, but let's park this for a little bit and keep going on your presentation and then come back to it.
Can I ask
Arthur,
a question?
Go for it. One quick question, but then I want us to keep going.
Okay, quickly. So Kenny, is that the same figure that you were charged for the use of the rooms?
Well, I wanted to talk about that, but I also don't want to derail Michelle's presentation. So if now is the right time to talk about that, that's fine. Otherwise, I can wait and we can talk
Let's let Michelle finish, and then let's come back to what is clearly the topic that everyone wants to talk about. But let's get all the way through the end, because this is not just about the music program. This is about BASE in general. So let's let Michelle do that.
Okay.
We'll come back.
Thanks.
Sure. Yeah. To Matt's point about, increasing, across the board, not just the music tuition. I don't know what the past directors did or didn't do. I know that we did adjust, our tuitions. We've increased our tuitions this past year across the board. And if we did incur the room assessments, we it would put us out of business right now. But moving forward, if we know that they're there and we know what they're going to be, you know, we can try to adjust some of our tuition. And one of my challenges is something that Mariah has asked me to prepare, and I'm happy to do, is get some comparisons with our competitors. So Newton and Cambridge and other communities, so that we're not basically, you know, driving our clientele to these other programs because they're that much cheaper than us. But I'll pull that information together. We're very glad and appreciative that the school committee waived the fees for fiscal year 2020. So when that bill came due in November, it would have been $182,000. We paid $195,000 back in November of 2019, just a few months before the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden, you know, we just didn't have the money to pay the $182,000. So again, we appreciate, you know, that waiver. One of the things during 2021, we really didn't use classrooms. Everything was online. I think in the end, we used 5 classrooms in April, and we'll use some for 3 days in June for the start of our summer program. So I you know, respectfully would request that we not be charged for those, because we are still recovering and in a deficit because of the pandemic and for some other issues. And for potentially for the committee to also consider just giving us another year to regroup and to rebuild.
How about
our
another
program.
5 years? How about another 5 years?
That would be nice, Arthur.
Okay.
We'll see.
Keep going on the presentation. Let's leave the discussion until the
Okay,
end.
all right. So I'm wrapping up here. So I'm going to ask the subcommittee or the school committee, whichever is appropriate, to consider some of these things. You know, waiving those charges, helping us with financial aid, potentially, because the financial aid that we've been providing has been coming out of our bottom line, our revenues. And then with music extension, if you would allow us to increase the cap that we're allowed to charge for our lessons, that would give us a little bit more wiggle room. I'd also like to consider, you know, a 46-cent increase for the hourly rate for the music teachers. I would love to be able to offer more. We can't afford that right now, but to go from $39.54 an hour to $40 an hour. We're losing some of our teachers to other programs because they make more money. So if I can even just offer a slight increase, I think that might be enough to say, listen, we're doing our best. We want to keep you here. But the big thing is, we had recently had a change in personnel. One of our program coordinators resigned, and I desperately need to replace that person so that we can run this program. With the significant cuts to our staff, we don't have the capacity to take on the additional hours that's needed here. So I wanted to get your blessing on being able to do that. Then we'd be able to continue. If we can't continue, then we would need to talk with Kenny, and this would impact his budget in turning the music extension program back over to Kenny. And you know, again, it would impact his budget.
Thanks. I just want to actually, Michelle, do you mind rolling back one slide? And
Sure.
then just so I just want to make it super clear to people as I understand the situation, and Michelle and Donna, correct me if I'm wrong. The issue of the 0.5 FTE is because the fund balance is low. There is the position does not have funds to support it at this time, which is the issue with HR not approving the rehiring of that position. So that's something that needs to get sorted out if the school committee, you know.
But Mariah, can
Yeah.
I?
Peter has his hand up, Arthur. Do you want to let him go first and then you go?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Peter. You're on mute.
There. Can people hear me now?
Yes.
Go ahead. Yep.
Okay. So you mentioned a comparison between what we're doing in Brookline and what other communities are doing, Cambridge and Arlington and Newton and so forth. And I had thought of the same thing. And then I began, as Michelle was speaking, to realize that I don't know whether or not our programs are comparable to theirs. I don't know whether they have, for example, a music program. Do they run summer programs? Do they run smart vacation programs? So I would just keep that in mind as we try and compare.
Thanks. Go ahead, Arthur.
So in terms of, I understand the bookkeeping part of the storm that we are going into. But what about the responsibilities of the person that come from that, from those funds? Do you understand what I'm saying? So one person has resigned, and that has shifted some monies or made some monies available, freed up some monies that we can hire a bookkeeper or financial person. What happens to the responsibilities of that program person? Where do we shift that to? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. The issue is, right, this person has responsibilities, but the other issue that offsets that is that there is currently no funding in the revolving fund to support the hiring of a new person. So it's a catch-22 in some ways.
It is.
And I think that,
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead, Arthur, go ahead.
No. I'm just trying to not allow you to get too far ahead and create a problem that is eventually, going to catch up to you.
Right. I mean, it can be either a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle. So I guess the question is, how do we fix that? Michelle, Matt has his hand up. Before we go to that, am I correct? Did you not present an overall sort of revolving fund projected revenues and projected expenses?
I did not. I prepared a slide on that. And then this afternoon, I've been going back and forth with finance on some of the funds that are in our revenue account right now really should be placed in fiscal year 22. So that makes the potential deficit more significant for next year. And I didn't want to present incorrect information to the community, and to the committee. So I held off on that slide. I have the general one that I showed early on about general revenues and expenses, but
I'm not talking about actuals. I'm talking about projected for next year. So you're.
No, I didn't do that. What I've thought about and what my plan is doing a 33% increase for next year, a 66% increase the following year, and just, keep incrementally working towards getting back to the $1.2 million that we had back in 2017. I just don't think with the pandemic that it's going to go back to the way it was overnight. I think we're going to get there again, but I think we still have some transition time in the community where some people may be reluctant to sit in a classroom, with other people right now. Teachers might be reluctant to teach in a class if they can't verify that everybody's been vaccinated. There's those kinds of things that we're struggling with right now.
So I think though that as we come up with what these like 3366, it sounds good, but where does it actually come from, right? And then how does that map, like 33 of 1.6 is 530-ish.
Yes.
Right. And so how
Yep.
does that compare against your expenses?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's something that, obviously we're not going to have it for today. And maybe that gives us some time to spend a little bit to do the deeper dive into music and focus on music for the day. But it's something that we obviously are going to need to talk about.
Absolutely.
Pretty soon, right?
Yes.
Very
yes,
soon. Okay.
Absolutely. And I'll prepare that for you. My intention was to have it for you today. But then when we discovered that, I that's going to change our forecast and what I need to plan for with our start of year balance for next year.
Okay.
So hopefully, the good news, I guess the bad news is I think the deficit for this year is going to be a little higher than I anticipated. The good news is we're going to start off with some funds for next year because we are taking those revenues for classes that have yet to occur and actually applying them to the fiscal year that they are occurring in, to start with a clean slate. So past practices of spending money off of projections, that's already stopped. That stopped back in, I think, September or October. Mary Ellen and Norman and Gina Franconi made changes to Munis so that no longer can revolving funds, not just base, but any other revolving fund, spend off of projections. One of the problems that base and others have sustained is the fact that, I mean, sadly, I don't think there was enough training or any training really, around how to monitor the projections and make adjustments to projections along the way. So everybody, like I said before, everybody was operating as if there was a huge surplus because that's what the projections looked like at the time. It wasn't the actual. And the reporting that we were getting wasn't offering the correct amount for whatever reason. And then we had the consulting report that said we were in a good position and people are, taking money for, when I say people, I mean the district is taking money from the account. So, I mean, I think everybody, I don't think there was any malice. I just think it just happened. And now we just need to move forward and, plan, and accounting needs to be more transparent in this. We're stopping spending against projections. The pandemic is behind us. The pandemic nearly decimated the program, period.
Yeah. Matt, I saw Matt had his hand up, and then I want to make sure we turn to the subcommittee members and other school committee members.
Certainly.
Thanks.
Yeah, just as a suggestion in regards to, like, I understand the need for hiring a part-time staff and or the bookkeeper. I think that's easier for the school committee to say yes post July 1. Like, hiring staff at this point, it doesn't seem like you're going to be able to recover the revenues, and setting new fees helps you plan those revenues to go with the programs that you're planning to offer, along with all the expenses that and anticipate you're going to have. So the whole budget aspect of it is kind of helpful for everybody to get the big picture. And before, I just don't recall getting a detailed budget. Not that it had to come to me, but really going over one for base, because I think for a number of years they did kind of grow their fund balance, and so people didn't look at it as closely for a while.
David, Susan, I think Steven's here too. I don't know if he's interested in any questions.
One question I have, did you look at what other communities have done with parallel programs? And are they also having similar increases?
You mean for music specifically or generally?
In general, for adult education.
We sent out a survey. I sent out a survey. The Heller consultants did a survey as well, so I have the results of those. But then I sent out my own. Some adult ed and community programs cover music classes, and others don't. There's no, like, it was very, not everybody does. It's very scattered throughout the state of Massachusetts. I sent the survey to all of the different directors of the programs. So it's the ones that did offer it, our pricing seemed to be in line with what they were offering. I think for our community in particular, the differential between the music school prices and what we're charging was, there was a big gap, and there should be, I think, but that's my personal opinion.
Susan, do you want to say anything?
Sure. So first of all, thank you. I feel like we've had a number of these conversations, Michelle.
Yeah.
And I know that I've asked a lot of questions in prior meetings, so I don't want to rehash them. I think a lot of them have been addressed here, so thank you. And it's very helpful to have Jeff here also. I had one very quick question. When you said that the high school construction had impacted programming, which is separate from the pandemic, what is that piece?
Yeah, so that was the United Arts Building, the UAB building. In particular, we weren't able to access, I wasn't here at the time.
But it wasn't construction. It wasn't construction. That wasn't the issue, Susan. So it didn't have to do with whether or not we could actually use those classrooms?
No.
Okay.
No, it had something to do with construction at the high school. I don't know if it was they shut the water off, there was something prevented us, and I can ask the staff because I like I said, I wasn't here. It wasn't that they weren't allowing us, they didn't want us in the space. It was for safety reasons apparently. So we lost revenue from classes that generated quite a bit. So the jewelry, the pottery, the woodworking, things that we couldn't just simply hold in another room because they're so specialized. The
No, I
dark
appreciate
room,
that.
So just so folks understand, the high school campus, a lot of the guts to it for HVAC, heat and electricity, some of it is at the UAB building. And in order to make adjustments to 115 Greeno for STEM and or for Tappan, power and water and other things had to be shut off. So the building wasn't going to be occupiable for parts of the summer. So that's why the campus was closed, so that contractors could do their work without trying to balance between programs coming in and out on different days.
Yeah, it just looked like a really big revenue drop compared to what I completely understand, Matt, what you just said. It just looked like a big revenue drop comparatively. That was so I just didn't understand that.
The UAB is pretty much their bread and butter.
Right.
They use the classrooms, most of them pretty consistently 6 days a week. Does that sound about right, Michelle?
yes, that's correct.
That's fine. It's just $200,000 or whatever the number is that was lost due to that. And that just seemed like a lot relative to what I thought we were doing at the UAB. But okay, never mind.
It was the adult ed classes that are held there, but also the children's classes that we would have liked to have held there as well. So that's why it was a significant drop in revenues. But again, that was before my time. This is what I've been told. I mean, there could be other reasons that I'm not aware of, but that was the one thing that the staff said that, I needed to consider, because that was one of my questions when I first started as well. what happened, and then of course the pandemic happened and here we are.
Yeah, no, the pandemic completely makes sense to me. And I do know all of the things that Matt just said. It just seemed like $200,000 for losing water for a little bit. That's the part that I wasn't really adding up. It just seemed like, but we can keep going. Okay.
Sure.
If it's okay, I'd like to bring us back to the music program and specifically sort of, I think there needs to be we have like bigger questions we can talk about based in the long run in terms of the FY22 revenues and expenses. But I'd like to talk about the elephant in the room assessment and talk about how we manage the room assessment, even if we don't necessarily want to, I'm putting out there, I guess, the question of room assessment for base overall has been something that was raised by Jeff, but there's also the specific question of the room assessment for the music program. And there's the questions that you raised in your last slide, Michelle. So, this is something that I think needs to come up at school committee next week, but it would be great to have some initial thoughts on school committee, whether we, there's also the question that Michelle's proposing of raising the fees, and do we approve of, raising the fees to that extent, to some lesser extent, and then how we manage this room assessment fee, and whether we would want to consider Michelle's request of waiving some or all of that RIM assessment fee.
The,
So I'd like
ju-
to, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Just so everybody knows, I mean, base historically, and that's something that has come out of the audit that Mary Ellen, myself, Donna, and I think Jan Lavoy are going to try to get together fairly soon to provide school committee with an apples to apples comparison of what we've paid in the past for things like, you know, we've paid for custodial salaries, we've paid for computer labs, electrical work, bike racks. I mean, you name it, like throughout the years, we've been a good partner to the district, I feel. And I think, you know, the assessment puts a formal, you know, amount that we can plan on, but I think the general feeling that, you know, people in the program, people associated with the program feel like it's been a money grab, to be honest with you. And I know that may not, that perhaps isn't the intent, or maybe it is, I don't know.
Yes, it is.
We want to work as a good partner. We want to do what's fair. And sometimes it's a bitter pill to swallow when you say you take $195,000, and I know it's going towards custodial supplies and, you know, maintenance and repairs and things like that. It just seems like a lot of money. When you look at the room, you know, charge, you think, well, you know, $3, $7, whatever, that's not that bad. But we use so many rooms that, you know, when that charge comes up, it's a tough pill to swallow. So, you know, we want to support our district partners, just like I know that you've been good in supporting us with the subsidy recently. But we want to do what's fair.
What do you mean by your district partners?
Arthur, can you hang on one second? I want to just
Yeah.
follow up with Matt on this. Matt, can you talk about the impact, any potential impact that would be if we were to waive either, and I just want to talk about for the upcoming year right now, but if we were to waive either the music program specific assessment and or the overall assessment, what
We
that
don't
would,
have, we don't, I mean, we can always break it out. But we would add up all their hours that they used it. And then, you know, subtract the 70% discount for that space and the cost of the rooms, which vary between, you know, $7 an hour and I can share my screen and show you what was in the budget, you know, $25 an hour, but most of what they use are regular classrooms. The music program, they should be being charged $7 an hour and then discounted from that. So there's that part of it, but it was voted in the budget to, I believe, to have the rental revolving funds, you know, assess the revenue. So if we're not going to assess them, they don't have to pay, and we don't take in that revenue, which would normally go to offset utilities costs as well as cleaning and maintenance costs and wear and tear to the space. So base, you know, pre-COVID used anywhere from 25 to 18,000 hours in rental space. You know, that's not light use. I mean, that is extra energy consumption, that is extra, you know, wear on the facilities, that is, you know, there is a cost to that. And whether or not that is going to be somewhat subsidized by the base users, or if the school committee and the rest of the community want that fully subsidized. I mean, this started before I got hired, where they wanted to start recovering costs for facilities as part of advisory and us making our capital requests. So all of our partners, so to speak, started paying even when they didn't want to. And when I first started, a lot of people were in arrears and they weren't going to be allowed back into the buildings until they paid. And then we got folks in the habit of paying. And other groups don't get, they pay the hourly rate. They don't get the discount that base does. And I know 200,000 is a lot of money, but if the fee were adjusted and spread out a little bit, because if you got to go back and look at the last time you had raised fees, when in 17, 18, when we started these discussions and before it even started getting implementing, fees hadn't been raised in a few years, if I remember correctly. And if they still haven't been raised, that range needs to be set and looked at, and it needs to be set based on what your costs are going to be, both salaries, benefits, overhead costs, sort of all of it, and costs to additional, I'm sure materials fees are going up for some of the classes. So if you provide that stuff, the apple I bought 2 weeks ago costs more now, and we're just in this inflationary period, and that type of planning needs to happen. And I know it's a lot, but
Matt, if we were
to,
for example, waive just the fee, which using Michelle's calculation of the 185 rooms, blah, 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 is around $19,000. As I calculated it with the 70% discount at an hour. If we were to waive that $19,000, that's part of the overall sort of.
Mariah, are you speaking just about the music program?
Just about the music program.
Can I have a moment to jump in?
Sure.
Because I think that I just want to clarify a few things. And I'm also wondering if it's possible to take the slide down for a second so that I can see people, because it just doesn't seem super relevant to, if you feel, thank you. Oh, it's so nice to see everyone. So I want to back up for a minute, and I want to give people here a little bit of a lay of the land of the music extension program. I'm the person in the room, with the exception of, I don't know if some of your kids have done the program for longer than I've been in my position, but I'm probably the person in the room who knows the program the best. And there's a bit of a history here that I think that we need to just make sure that everyone understands. So when I began my role as curriculum coordinator 8 years ago, that was a time of change in my role. There had prior to me been a K-8 performing arts curriculum coordinator and a 9-12 performing arts curriculum coordinator. So I was the first person in the role of K-12 curriculum coordinator. So I took over both.
Kenny, can I interrupt you really quickly? I just want to be mindful that we're almost 15 minutes over the end of the meeting already. So I want to make sure that
I will speed this up. I will get to
okay, thank you.
So, and part of this job came with it, running the music extension program 100%. And the only reason why I bring up the two different coordinators was because prior to me being in this role, the person who ran that program was the K-8 coordinator. So being the good doobie and hard worker that I am, I took on that program and I ran it for 4 years single-handedly with the help of our performing arts secretary. There had been a prior stipend, a very small stipend of about $2,000 to help with scheduling. So this program has existed for, like, when I took it on, over 20 years as a part of our performing arts school day program. It is an essential part of our program. It is offered to every student. We support financial aid, financial assistance 100%. We keep costs down low for all students. And this was near and dear to us and very much an essential part of our school day instrumental program with our 5th through 8th grade bands and orchestras. And so at in coming up on fiscal year 2018, I put in my budget a request for my secretary, our performing arts secretary, to be increased from a 0.67 to a 1.0, or alternatively from a 10-month to a 12-month position, so that we could have more support for this program. And that was in my FY18 budget request. So Mary Ellen came to us with an idea to have BASE take over a part of the program and for us to partner on the program. So at that point, we agreed on a partnership where I would continue to oversee the hiring, the educational aspects, the interaction with the teachers, the facilitation between the school day teachers and the music extension teachers, communication with parents around educational things, and BASE would pick up scheduling and payroll, which was a huge thing. I mean, I was literally submitting payroll things that I was signing off on every week for 4 years. So that was a huge piece, no small piece. But prior to this, and Arthur asked about this, specifically, there was absolutely zero charge of any rooms. So I'm, and again, not only for my 4 years of doing this, but for the history, because it was recognized as part of our school day program. And that, goes to what Jeffrey was saying about just having things written down and clear. So maybe, maybe there should be this, but it needs to be a clear process stepping into that, into what we're doing. And so it wasn't until November of 2019 so after that, the FY18 year, we ran a full successful year of base running this FY18. And then it wasn't until FY19 that we got a room assessment, which became as a surprise. And so Matt, I hear what you're saying about the discounted cost, and I think we need to make sure that all these numbers are accurate, but the, you know, and Mariah, I think it was a little more than $20,000. What I see is room use assessment of $57,543 in FY18, $52,000.
I'm saying what it should be in FY22 based on Michelle's numbers, not what it historically has been, just to be clear. That's the.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So in any case, large sum of money, and I'm not saying that they're, you know, I'm just saying that this never existed and came as a surprise. And it felt like, whoa, this is a huge amount of money to pay when we're trying to make a program that is accessible, cost accessible for all Brookline families. You know, certainly for the ones with financial assistance, we had a revolving fund. That's how we ran it. We had a revolving fund. We took in money. We paid the financial assistance. We paid the teachers. We took in just enough to pay the teachers. It was fine. It all worked. So to hear that we were getting hit with a large amount of money that we owed, it felt instantly like, well, we can't, how do we do that? How do we run the program and not raise prices? And I'm not talking about the increase Michelle's talking about, like a modest increase you would normally have. As Michelle pointed out, you also want to think about paying the teachers and giving them an increase because they haven't gotten one in a while. That's all fine. It just to get a huge room assessment that was never once discussed, never once, and Matt, this was before your time, I believe. So it was never once discussed. It was never part of a budget that was laid out. It was never a proposal. It was never in writing. So to have that happen, and then, you know, I brought it up instantly when it came up, and it's not till now that we're all having the chance to have this conversation. So I think that this is a unique part of our school day program. I do not think it should be, I mean, I think if our other school day programs, our townwide jazz band, our townwide orchestra, our townwide concert band, our townwide chorus, we are not charged room fees for any of those. We're not charged for any of these programs that we have for our students, and this would fall into that category. So I just really think for this program, it makes sense either not to have the fee. I mean, we could look at bringing it back in the performing arts department. I could do that. I would like some support to do that. But that is a possibility. I just want this program to run. I want it to be cost friendly to parents. You know, music lessons are expensive. Even when they're not that expensive, they're still expensive. And we're doing a good job of keeping the costs relatively reasonable and supporting financial assistance. But I would advocate for that to be removed, or, you know, again, for this particular program. That's all I can speak to is this particular program.
Michelle and Peter, I'm going to hold on you for a little bit because I want to get to the two subcommittee members and then see if we want to make a recommendation as a subcommittee at least about this. David, Susan. Don't both of you speak at the same time.
David looks like he's going to wait me out. He's got that like lawyer thing going on. I'm married to a lawyer. I know how you work. So I guess I'm the part that I'm still a little bit fuzzy on, although I feel like I'm almost there, but like, as we've thought through the pieces going backwards that were not charging for rooms that weren't used, that felt very clear to me. And then I think the part that is a little bit less clear is just the implication to this year's budget if we can do this. So Mariah, I think you asked it. I'm still not sure I understood the answer, but it might just
it wasn't
be me
answered.
because, okay,
it wasn't
so can we
totally answered, but I'm going to ask it again,
okay,
which is
so that's where I am.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is to Matt, which is, assuming that my math is right on, and I looked up in the table on our revolving fund for the room rental page, it's $15 an hour, 185 hours, 28, but I did all that math out. So it's about $20,000. If we were to waive the room rental fee for the music program, what would the impact on sort of the other things in our budget? Would that $20,000 be covering actual custodial salaries that we would have to forego? Or is that something that you use to offset utilities and sort of wear and tear generally? Like, what would happen if we were to vote to forego? Susan, is this the right question that we're talking about the same thing? What would happen if we were to vote to forego that room assessment fee?
So that room assessment fee is used to cover utility costs. It contributes to that. It contributes to some custodial salaries, and it contributes to some cleaning and I'll call it light maintenance supplies, whether it be like vacuums or things like that.
So what would happen if we were to forego that payment?
We would do less, or we would hopefully, be able to make it up with some other renters.
Okay,
And that the expenses from the wear and tear of their use happens to work out more favorably than this program, which would be further subsidized.
okay. David?
Right.
Hang on one second, Arthur. I really do want to go let the subcommittee wrap
Go
up.
ahead, go ahead.
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Just to Matt's last point about make up for it with other renters, do we have other renters who are lined up?
We've had some interest, but we haven't really, come back to full speed yet. People have been asking off and on when they can get back in, and until the governor recently lifted things. So I haven't heard a lot about changes for requests for next year, but I'm assuming a lot of these folks are still in business, so they want to get back in business. We generally seem to be a pretty good match for a lot of the programs that come to us, because the type of services they deliver work well within school walls, and we also have their clients usually pretty close by. So they want to be here, and the overhead is light for part-time work, whether that be instructional services or even religious services. If you're only using it a few hours a week or part-time, it's easier and cheaper to rent somebody else's space on an hourly basis than own the building outright and then pay for the maintenance and all the other costs with that.
I would just say that in OpenGov right now, there is a projected revenue in that account of around 300,000 and a projected expense of around 330,000. But I know that Donna said, I don't know if that's the latest, because I know that there's been some issues in updating those. But that is what's at least in OpenGov right now. Donna, is there any update, or Matt, any update in any of that?
I don't think we've submitted an update since March or
Okay.
April. I don't remember when
Okay.
the last time was.
So can I just ask one other question, which is about the room rental sort of overall? I recall that one of the conversations that we had was about sort of close-in partners and people that are sort of third-party for-profits or churches or someone else, right? They're not kind of, Extended Days seemed it was in kind of a different category than more, for-profit or other kinds of entities. So are there any other, and this, we might not know this, but if we do, are there any other people in the room rental discussion who are as co-curricular as music lessons are? I mean, there's something to be, I'm mindful of the fact that, were this not to happen, were children not to have access to this at all, what that would do from a pedagogical point of view to us. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out, is this the only one that falls into essentially this kind of co-curricular category, or are there others? So I know that there's Extended Day and we partner closely with them. I know there's the music school, but are there, that's my question.
So when you say co-curricular, do you mean our employees, or through BASE? Because everybody else that partners with us is generally not under the purview of the school committee.
I meant from a student point of view.
I think what Susan is getting at is that our program, as the name suggests, is an extension of our school day curricular program. That it is an integral part of our
There's
band.
none that I'm aware of.
There's the rec department.
But that's not intertwined with our curriculum. That our curriculum doesn't rely on the rec activities to proceed in the same way that music relies on the after-school conservatory.
I mean, I would put
Since
rec,
we don't have a rec program really in the middle schools, a sports program, they basically do some of it.
right. I guess in my mind, rec and Extended Day go into that very next, if we're kind of doing concentric circles, rec and Extended Day are sort of in the very next one. I would put something like BEEP I think I'd put this kind of in the center. And then I think there's sort of the close in partners. Extended Day is an enormously important partner. I think REC is an enormously important partner. And then I would think about sort of those other people out there that we rent to. And I do believe in the notion of tiered pricing. And I guess this one just feels curricular to me. And I'm just trying to figure out, is this the only one or are there other ones? I'm asking more of a structural strategic question, but okay.
I think we have the
love-
curriculum subcommittee chair here who might be able to weigh in if there's anything else. Go ahead, Jen. And then I do want us to wrap up and like come to conclusion so everyone can go eat dinner. Go ahead, Jen.
I'm not aware of any other programs that are utilized quite this way. I think that the music extension program is, if we're going to say that it's an extension of our music program, of our performing arts department, as part of our curriculum, and that you've sort of gotten some of the history of how BASE ended up with this program. And there wasn't, when we were running it in-house, because BASE is still part of PSB. So, you know, if we were running it in-house before with Kenny, and we were not charging ourselves, we're still charging ourselves when we're charging BASE. So that's where I'm at.
You hit the nail right on the head.
Yeah.
I have to say this. You gave us the program. This isn't something that we created for ourselves.
And I know we want to keep moving on, and I know we're behind already. So I think in that way, it's how I feel differently than the child-focused Smart Summers programs, which is not a curricular connection with our programs. It is a program, it is for children, and kids from public schools of Brookline can, but other kids can register that are not public school students, whereas the music extension program, if I'm not mistaken, so please correct me.
It's only
is a
for our
program
students.
that is exclusive to PSB students.
Yeah.
So
But
it's
it's
the
a
only one
special student. But it's a
But
special student. It's not just that it's one of your students. It's a special student. It's a student that can't afford the prices that are being charged by the music school.
We have a very diverse group of students in our program. That includes what you just said.
Jim,
Arthur.
I'm going to make a motion and then I'm going to let you say something and then we're going to vote and any other
Right.
comments. The motion I'm
Right.
going to make is that we waive the music program room rental fees for the current year, or for the upcoming year, I should say. And that I'm going to frame this maybe not in the most graceful wording, but that we look at the pricing that Michelle has proposed over the next couple days with Kenny and with Michelle, and come back to full school committee next week with a fee to vote. Does that, Michelle, Kenny, do you have any thoughts, or is that okay that okay? And then, does that work for you, Kenny?
It does.
Okay. And then Jim, go ahead and say what you need to say, and then hopefully we can get it. Or actually, David or Susan, does either one of you second that?
I'll second it.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I don't have to add to the comments. I think the comments are right on and feel very good. I just had a question for Kenny. Kenny, do the students receive any school credit or for participating in this program? Is it like any course they take in school?
Well, so the program is for our 5th through 8th graders. We've at times allowed 4th graders in as well. Every student in the 4th grade studies an instrument in our school system during the school day. And then many of those continue in our 5th through 8th grade bands or orchestras. And they're playing an ensemble. And this is the place where they get the complement to the ensemble playing, which is the more individual attention on their instruments. So it is not that they're getting credit for it. It is a support of not only their individual work during the school day, but also the whole band as a group, that it brings, it rises all ships, so to speak.
Okay. Well, just the comment that is integral to your program is pretty compelling. But the arguments you've made are excellent. I don't have to add to them.
Okay, let's take it to a vote. David?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay.
I vote yes as well.
Oh, that's right. You're there. Sorry, Stephen.
It's okay.
New subcommittee member, yeah.
Welcome, Stephen. Hey, Mariah, just on this point, when we're
Yeah.
going to bring this back to the full school committee, I do think it would be important to explain sort of the tiering theory, the philosophy, so that this doesn't open up the door to a bunch of people who don't understand, well, does this mean I don't have to pay either? Because I do
Yeah.
think that there's logic behind it. And I don't know if that's transparent if people weren't part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's good. We'll talk through that also at full school committee next week. And then Kenny and Michelle, you and the three of us maybe can connect on just with that sort of expectation that full school committee will probably support that, what we should be doing in terms of the overall that sub program revenues and expenses, and then thinking about what else we do in terms of the broader, not necessarily with Kenny, but Michelle and I, in terms of overall program revenues and expenses. Okay, it's 7:01.
Thank you.
We're 31 minutes over. You're welcome, Kenny. I apologize for not being able to run on time. I'm so glad that everyone could join us. Thank you especially to Jeff, who's our visitor, and to the base board members. And we will we'll reconvene on this topic next week. Okay? Okay.
Have a great
Thank
evening,
you.
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Arthur.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Everybody